June 6, 1944, a date etched into history as D-Day, but few remember the silent courage of the Rangers assigned one of the most perilous tasks of the entire Normandy invasion. Before sunrise, the 2nd and 5th Ranger battalions gathered aboard Higgins boats in the churning waters off the coast of Normandy, preparing to assault Point du Hoc, a 100-foot cliff fortress manned by elite German forces. Their mission was simple and brief: scale the cliffs, neutralize the artillery threatening Omaha and Utah beaches, and hold a position until reinforcement arrived. Yet the odds were staggeringly against them. The night was dark, the sea unforgiving. Rough waves battered the landing craft, and many Rangers were tossed into the cold, frothing water before even reaching the shore. As they approached the base of the cliffs, mortar shells and machine gun fire raked the landing zone. Lieutenant Colonel James Earl Rudder, commanding the 2nd Battalion, shouted over the roar of guns, "Rangers, lead the way. No mission is impossible if we climb together." Despite his rallying cry, nearly half of the men were injured, drowned, or missing by the time they touched land. Equipment was another critical challenge. Each Ranger carried over 60 pounds of gear: rifles, grenades, satchel charges, while clinging to wet ropes and jagged rocks. Many ropes snapped under the strain, sending men tumbling back into enemy fire. One private, writing in his diary later, described the climb as a test of flesh and faith, each step a question of life or death. The chaos blurred the line between bravery and sheer desperation, yet each Ranger pressed upward, driven by duty and camaraderie. Historical records show the Germans were prepared for an assault, but not for the sheer audacity of the Rangers. At the summit, they faced fortified bunkers, barbed wire, and trenches, obstacles that would have stalled any conventional infantry. It was here that the first lesson of Point du Hoc became apparent. Courage alone was never enough. Adaptability under fire could mean survival. Rudder's battalion improvised using axes, demolition charges, and sheer ingenuity, carving a path through enemy defenses. Amid the blood and smoke, small moments of human resilience appeared. One medic repeatedly risked his life, dragging wounded comrades to relative safety while bullets ricocheted around him. Another soldier, separated from his unit, used the terrain to his advantage, taking out a German machine gun nest that had pinned down his friends. Letters and journals recovered decades later reveal their inner thoughts. "We climbed not knowing who would be left standing," one Ranger wrote, a stark reminder that history often leaves out the names of those who vanished in silence. Even as the first wave reached the top, the full scope of the challenge remained hidden. Some units were missing entirely, swallowed by the chaos of sea, cliff, and combat. Survivors pressed forward, unsure if reinforcements would arrive, unaware of who had fallen or been swept away by the tides. The air was thick with gunpowder, fear, and determination, an unforgettable mix that would define their legacy, yet leave many stories untold. The cliffs of Point du Hoc held not only German guns but also unanswered questions: who survived, who was lost, and how much heroism went unrecorded. As dawn broke over the cliffs, the Rangers had achieved the impossible by reaching the top, but the true test, the discovery of the artillery, the fight to hold their position, and the creeping uncertainty about missing comrades, was just beginning. Their story was only partially written, leaving a shadow of mystery over the sacrifices made that morning, a shadow that history has struggled to illuminate fully. The stage was set for the days ahead, where survival, strategy, and the unseen hand of fate would shape the forgotten heroes of Point du Hoc. The first flight of June 6, 1944 revealed the full scale of chaos atop Point du Hoc. The Rangers who had made the grueling climb faced an immediate and brutal reality. German artillery and machine gun positions were still operational, and their numbers were far larger than anticipated. Small groups of Rangers found themselves scattered along the cliff tops, isolated and under relentless fire, as the roar of battle from Omaha and Utah beaches echoed across the countryside. Many men simply vanished into the confusion, swallowed by the battlefield, leaving only the faint trace of their courage behind. Supply and reinforcement lines were fragile at best. Ammunition ran dangerously low, and communication with command became nearly impossible due to destroyed radios and disrupted signaling lines. The men improvised, using captured German weapons, cobbled together barricades, and sheer ingenuity to hold their precarious positions. Private First Class Leonard G. Reinsch later recalled in his diary, "We had nothing but each other and the cliff beneath our feet. There was no plan B. The struggle was as much against isolation and uncertainty as it was against the enemy." The human cost was staggering. Casualties mounted as Rangers fell to snipers, mortar shells, and hand-to-hand combat. Medics risked their lives moving along narrow ledges to reach the wounded, often returning to the fight only to see their comrades fall again. Lieutenant Colonel Rudder himself was wounded, yet he continued to direct fragmented units, ensuring that their mission, the destruction of the German artillery, remained the central objective. The fragility of life on that cliff underscored a harsh wartime truth. Even heroism could not guarantee survival. Amid the suffering, the Rangers demonstrated remarkable adaptability. They dug shallow trenches, improvised field hospitals and bomb craters, and coordinated small counterattacks against German positions that threatened to overrun their lines. Historical accounts reveal the sheer improvisation required. "We fought not as battalions, but as men, each acting where we could make a difference," one Ranger later reflected. Their efforts exemplify the principle that in warfare, initiative and courage often determine outcomes more than numbers alone. Yet the mysteries of Point du Hoc deepened. Some men were unaccounted for, their names omitted from initial reports, leaving families and historians to puzzle over their fates for decades. Letters, personal notes, and diaries recovered after the war provided glimpses but no complete answers. The sense of disappearance added a haunting layer to the victory, reminding all who study this battle that history often remembers the mission while losing the men who carried it out. As night fell on that first day, the Rangers had held the cliffs, but at enormous cost. The survivors looked down on the shoreline from which they had climbed, aware that many of their comrades were missing, lost in the fog of war, the tide, or the enemy's fire. The cliff stood as a silent witness to both extraordinary bravery and the grim uncertainty that would define the coming days. With reinforcements still hours away, the stage was set for the next chapter, the Rangers' desperate search for the artillery and the continuation of their perilous fight under the shadow of unknown losses. By mid-morning on June 6th, the Rangers atop Point du Hoc faced a bitter revelation. The massive German artillery pieces they had been sent to destroy were nowhere to be found. Intelligence had reported 6 heavy guns in position, capable of firing on both Omaha and Utah beaches, but they had been moved inland before the assault. The men realized that their mission now required not only holding the cliffs, but also locating and neutralizing weapons that were hidden somewhere in the dense Norman countryside, a task fraught with uncertainty and danger. The search was perilous. Small groups of Rangers ventured into the surrounding hedgerows, navigating a maze of bombed-out villages, thick undergrowth, and concealed German patrols. Each step could be their last, as sniper fire, mines, and sudden ambushes made the countryside a deadly trap. Private First Class Charles Chuck Jorgensen later wrote in his diary, "We walked like ghosts among the ruins, each shadow a potential death, each sound a warning." The men improvised constantly, using maps, compass bearings, and any local intelligence they could find, often working in near-complete isolation from the rest of the battalion. Despite the confusion, the Rangers displayed extraordinary tactical flexibility. They employed captured German explosives to destroy suspected artillery positions and set booby traps along likely patrol routes. One squad discovered a camouflage battery and managed to disable it, preventing it from shelling the beaches, yet most of the guns remained unaccounted for. This operation highlighted a critical lesson of Point du Hoc. In combat, the ability to adapt quickly to unexpected circumstances can be as decisive as raw firepower. The human element of endurance was tested to its limits. Food, water, and ammunition were scarce, and exhaustion weighed heavily on both body and spirit. In letters recovered after the war, one Ranger reflected, "We were alive, but it didn't feel like survival. It felt like a pause between battles." Even as they pushed forward, the uncertainty of who was missing, captured, or killed added a psychological strain as intense as the physical danger. By the afternoon, sporadic skirmishes had yielded some success, yet the full scope of the German defenses remained shrouded in mystery. Reports from other units confirmed that artillery had indeed been moved inland, but precise locations were unknown, creating a dangerous intelligence gap. The Rangers' resourcefulness and courage were only partially rewarded, leaving both command and the men themselves uneasy about what threats still lay hidden. As dusk approached, the men regrouped on the cliff tops, battered but determined. The immediate threat of German fire had been mitigated in part, yet the invisible danger of the hidden guns and the possibility of more missing comrades loomed large. The operation's success was shadowed by the uncertainty of what they had not yet discovered. The next chapter would test not only their fighting ability, but also their capacity to endure isolation, confusion, and the creeping fear of disappearing without a trace in the fog of war. By the second day after D-Day, communications with Allied command had faltered almost entirely, leaving the Rangers isolated atop Point du Hoc. Radio sets were damaged by enemy fire, messengers were intercepted or killed, and smoke signals proved unreliable under constant German bombardment. Small units were cut off from one another, forcing Rangers to make split-second decisions in the absence of guidance, all while knowing that every choice could mean life or death. The struggle for survival intensified. With supplies dwindling, soldiers resorted to rationing water and sharing what little ammunition remained. Trenches had been hastily dug into the rocky terrain, and makeshift shelters offered scant protection against the elements and relentless enemy fire. Some men scavenged abandoned German positions for food and medical supplies, while others took extreme risks to recover their fallen comrades, leaving them exposed to sniper fire and artillery strikes. One medic noted in his journal, "Every step outside the trench is a gamble, but leaving a man to die is a gamble I cannot take." The human cost was staggering. Isolated and exhausted, Rangers faced the psychological strain of seeing friends disappear into smoke, rubble, or the sea, with no certainty of their fate. Letters found decades later revealed a grim mix of hope and despair. "I do not know who will be here in the morning, but we cannot stop now," wrote one corporal, capturing the tension that weighed on everyone. Their ordeal illustrated a crucial wartime lesson. Survival often depended not only on courage, but also on the ability to adapt to a fragmented and unpredictable battlefield. Despite these overwhelming challenges, ingenuity and resilience shone through. Rangers set traps, coordinated small ambushes against German patrols, and improvised communication methods to pass crucial messages along the cliff line. These acts, though minor in scale, had a significant impact, delaying enemy reinforcements and buying precious time. It was an example of how initiative, even when cut off from command, could shape the outcome of an operation. Yet the mystery of missing soldiers deepened. Dozens of men were unaccounted for, and the terrain itself seemed to swallow them. Some had fallen into hidden crevices, others lost in the chaos of the initial landings. Even today, historians debate the exact number of Rangers who went missing in those first 48 hours. The sense of disappearance was compounded by the fragmented nature of the records, leaving gaps in the story of what happened on the cliffs. As night descended once more on Point du Hoc, the Rangers huddled in their foxholes and trenches, weary but resolute. The cliff remained under their control, yet the uncertainty of who had survived and who had vanished cast a shadow over their apparent success. The next chapter would bring the arrival of reinforcements, but would also reveal the staggering toll of secrecy and isolation in one of the most daring operations of World War II. On the third day after D-Day, reinforcements finally arrived to consolidate the Rangers' tenuous hold on Point du Hoc. The fresh troops brought much-needed ammunition, medical supplies, and additional manpower, allowing the battered units to strengthen defensive positions along the cliff tops. Yet the arrival did not erase the grim realities. Many Rangers were still missing, and the hidden German artillery remained largely unaccounted for, leaving an unsettling air of incompleteness over the victory. Post-war investigations would later reveal the staggering human cost. Despite successfully holding the cliffs, the Rangers had endured over 50% casualties, with dozens unaccounted for in the chaos of battle. Some had fallen during the initial assault, others vanished in the hedgerows, and a few were captured or killed in isolated skirmishes before reinforcements could reach them. The partial nature of the reports and classified mission details left the broader public unaware of the true scope of sacrifice, rendering many of the soldiers' deeds virtually invisible to history. The arrival of reinforcements also highlighted the operational challenges of secrecy. Point du Hoc had been deemed a special objective requiring precise planning, yet the unpredictability of German movements and the difficulty of maintaining communications created a dangerous intelligence gap. Commanders relied on the initiative and judgment of small units to carry out tasks far beyond what conventional training could fully prepare them for. Lieutenant Colonel Rudder's post-war reflections emphasize this lesson. "We were ordered to climb cliffs and hold the impossible. Success demanded courage, creativity, and trust in men who had only each other to rely upon." The mystery surrounding the missing Rangers lingered. Families wrote letters that went unanswered, while official reports minimized losses to avoid disheartening the public. For decades, historians and relatives pieced together fragments of letters, journals, and eyewitness accounts, but many questions remained. Who had been lost in the initial landing? Who had survived only to vanish later? And which acts of heroism were never recorded? These gaps underscored the human cost of war that is often left out of the history books, the shadow of heroism that hangs over battles like Point du Hoc. By the end of the third day, the cliff was secure, yet the men surveyed a battlefield marked not by glory alone, but by uncertainty and the weight of absence. The heroic deeds of those who climbed, fought, and endured in silence contrasted sharply with the missing names and unrecorded sacrifices. The stage was set for a slow reckoning with the aftermath, a search for answers, recognition, and the preservation of memory that would stretch far beyond the war itself. As the sun set over Normandy, Pointe du Hoc stood as both a symbol of courage and a reminder of the gaps in historical memory. The mission had been accomplished, but the cost remained incompletely tallied, and the fates of many of the Rangers were still shrouded in mystery. The final chapter would trace the long shadow of these events, exploring how historians and families sought to uncover the truth and honor the forgotten heroes who had faced impossible odds. Decades after the guns fell silent at Pointe du Hoc, the echoes of that brutal climb and fight continue to haunt families, historians, and military scholars alike. The missing Rangers, those who disappeared during the initial assault or in the chaotic days that followed, remain a haunting mystery. Letters, medals, and battlefield artifacts gradually resurfaced, offering fragments of insight into the courage and sacrifice that had once been hidden in the shadows of history. Efforts to piece together the stories of the missing were painstaking. Historians pored over after-action reports, diaries, and testimonies, reconstructing patrol movements and skirmishes to determine what might have happened to men never officially accounted for. Relatives searched graveyards, military archives, and battlefield remnants, hoping to uncover even the smallest clue. Each discovery shed light on individual acts of heroism, yet many questions remained. Who had fallen in unmarked graves? Who had survived only to vanish into the confusion? And which heroic deeds were lost to time? The Rangers' experiences at Pointe du Hoc continue to offer lessons in leadership, courage, and resilience. Their determination under extreme duress exemplifies the timeless principle that preparation and bravery can only carry soldiers so far. Adaptability, quick thinking, and trust in one another often determine survival. Military historians often cite the operation as a case study in balancing audacity with strategic uncertainty, a reminder that even the most meticulously planned missions can produce unexpected outcomes. Yet perhaps the most poignant legacy of Pointe du Hoc lies in the unresolved questions, the men who were never seen again, the letters never answered, the personal sacrifices that went unrecorded. These missing Rangers represent the human cost behind what is often simplified as historical victory. Their stories, partially reconstructed through fragments of memory, artifacts, and family recollections, ensure that the courage displayed that June morning is remembered, even if the full details may never be known. As the cliffs rise over the Normandy coastline today, silent and enduring, they stand as a monument not just to victory, but to those who vanished in pursuit of it. Pointe du Hoc reminds us that history often remembers battles, but it is the quiet courage of individuals and the mysteries that surround them that truly shapes our understanding of war. The forgotten heroes of the Rangers' D-Day landing may never be fully accounted for, yet their legacy endures in every step along those cliffs, in every story pieced together decades later, and in the continued search to honor their sacrifice. The mystery remains, the heroism stands eternal, and the lessons of Pointe du Hoc continue to resonate, a timeless tribute to those who climbed, fought, and in some cases, vanished without a trace.